If you ask AI for what the benefits of the kettlebell are in kettlebell training, it will give you AI generic answers. And all of them are probably true for the most part. Strength, power, stability, flexibility, cardio with weights. They're highly versatile, so you can do a lot with one piece of equipment. They don't really wear out, so they're a really good investment. They don't take up a lot of space. There's so many things, and so do your own search, right? I'm not going to, I mean, I did, but I'm not going to go deeply into what AI can already tell you. But what I am going to do is I'm going to tell you something AI will not tell you, which is actually the most important benefit of kettlebell training. And when you understand the concept that I'm about to share with you, it will help you with your training, especially when it comes to your technique with kettlebells, and answer probably questions that you're going to have along the way just by understanding this one simple thing that is one of the most important benefits of kettlebell training that the AI doesn't even understand yet. So I haven't even searched. Maybe AI will tell you this. I don't think it will. Anyway, what are we going to talk about? So understand that when I say the benefits of kettlebells, it's weird because like, what's kettlebell training? Would you say dumbbell training or barbell training? I think you might say mace training, but I don't know. Would you really say kettlebell training? So what's the distinction that we're really talking about here? And I think the distinction is the distinction between a bodybuilding mindset where your primary goal is to pack on as much size, build as much muscle as possible, okay? That's one approach to weightlifting. And then the other approach to weightlifting would be more of a performance mindset. And so when I say kettlebell training, if I use that ever as a shorthand, understand what I really am saying there is people who approach weightlifting with a performance mindset more than an aesthetic mindset, okay? So that's what we're talking about here. What's the benefit of kettlebells? What's the benefit? So we're assuming that you have a performance mindset. And this is the thing that I want you guys to understand, that once you understand this, like I said, it's going to really give you something to think about as you progress through your training. And that is this, okay? I got my little friend here. This is a 9-pounder, so it's super light for demonstration purposes. This kettlebell, it has a line of gravity that it wants to follow. And I am preventing it from following that line. It's a very predictable line. I know exactly which way it wants to go and how it wants to get there. The heavier the kettlebell, the more it wants to follow that line. And the harder I have to work to prevent it from doing so. Quite simple, right? I also, in my body, have what we call a plumb line of my own body, where if I'm in neutral posture and I'm standing, straight up, there's a plumb line of all of that mass, which is centered pretty much right between the 2 feet, sort of in front of the heels. Okay, and that's a plumb line where all of that weight is balanced over generally. And you can shift your plumb line a little bit from left to right without really making a lot of difference. You're just kind of leaning on one side, the other. You shift it a little bit front and back, but there's always a plumb line of your body. Now, as we learn how to lift kettlebells, because our primary goal really with each lift is efficiency, our responsibility and what we have to learn how to do is how to keep those two lines as close together as possible. As we are lifting this weight from the ground to the overhead position and everything in between, we have to learn how to keep the kettlebell as that line of gravity of the kettlebell as close to the plumb line of my body as possible. Now, really quickly, I just want to make a side note when I share this with you, because you could say, well, what about barbells that you lift also with squats and deadlifts and cleans and snatches and jerks and things like that? The same thing applies with the barbell. So there you go. And I would say, correct, it does apply with the barbell, but With a barbell, this is something that we learn as personal trainers on day one of even the most low-level weekend certification. We have 3 planes of movement. We have the sagittal plane, we have the frontal plane, and we have the transverse plane. When it comes to a barbell or any other bilateral exercise with a free weight, that line of gravity of that weight and my plumb line, I'm really only responsible for keeping them together on the sagittal plane. Okay, I got 2 hands on the barbell. As long as I'm placing my hands evenly and I'm not centered off to the side of the barbell, then that barbell is going to stay as centered on my plumb line naturally. All I have to do is keep it sagittal plane as close as possible. With a kettlebell, because the shoulder that's holding on to the kettlebell is off to the side of your plumb line, now I have to use lean to get my shoulder that is over holding on to and anchoring the kettlebell. I have to use lean to get my shoulder over my own plumb line so that when I lift the kettlebell, it goes up and not out. Does that make sense? So now I'm responsible not just for sagittal plane of keeping those 2 lines together. I'm responsible for sagittal and frontal plane, keeping those 2 together. And in order to do it, I'm also going to utilize the transverse plane, the in-between, meaning that I'm going to have frontal plane movement, lean, as well as rotation. So if I'm picking up a kettlebell that's underneath my plumb line, it's right in between my ankles, that's the dead position, I'm picking that up. I'm going to have rotation and lean. I'm going to clean it up to the rack position where it's still centered. Once it's up here safely racked, I might come and move it off to the side a little bit, depending upon what I'm doing with it. But if I was to try to press that weight, I'm going to lean, I'm going to connect my tricep to my lat, and I'm going to try to keep this where the kettlebell is anchored to, elbow over my plumb line as I press the bell up, and then I reorganize my body to square once it gets there. If I don't do that lean, then I'm pressing it like this, and that's going to be very heavy. If I'm bodybuilding, that's fine, if I'm just focusing on the muscle. But if I'm focusing on pressing, military pressing as much weight as possible, then I'm going to lean and press. As I snatch a kettlebell up, I'm going to lean. That arm's going to come up in a straight line over that plumb line with the kettlebell on it in the hand. And then I'm going to come up, and sometimes I'm in a bit of a squat by now. So it's up, down, and guess what? I'm still, my arm is still over my plumb line, the kettlebell in hand, and I'm still leaning as I catch, and then I come up, and then now I can move that kettlebell laterally just a little bit as I square up my posture once it's already in that position. But the point is, as you're moving that kettlebell, you have to keep it as close to your plumb line as possible using all 3 planes of motion. For this reason, the kettlebell balances your body from left to right like nothing else that you can use. Because it is so versatile in this capacity, there's nothing that helps to balance your body like the kettlebell. It balances your body by creating more flexibility or even flexibility, strength, all of these things. But here's the other way that it helps to balance your body that I think is fundamentally the most important. So here's my analogy, especially if you've ever thrown a ball. If you haven't really done a lot of this, then maybe you've tried handwriting with your non-dominant hand and what that feels like. And it's just like crazy trying to write something, trying to throw a ball. And yet if you keep practicing, you actually get pretty good at it relatively quickly. But that's the level that a kettlebell actually helps to strengthen your body and balance your body is on the neurological level. It helps to get the non-dominant side of your body firing with neural intelligence in a way that not much else can do. So as you train with kettlebells, and this is why I say this little bit of information and this way of looking at it can be helpful to you in your path, is because when you're training with kettlebells, if you notice that when you clean a kettlebell, you naturally just kind of come off and you're leaning to the side. And then I've actually taken a photo of me leaning, doing a various exercise, a snatch or a press or something, and had people say, oh, your core is unstable. And so if ever you're seeing this and you think, oh, am I doing it wrong? No, hey, you're not doing that wrong at all. What you're doing is you're making that weight you're lifting that weight as efficiently as possible. Efficiency always translates to safety. You're putting less stress on one part of your body, you're spreading it out, and you're also making that weight, you're not overworking that weight. You're making that weight feel as light as possible. There's so many different ways you could say the same thing. Other people might say you're cheating the weight. It's like, whatever, however you want to look at it. I'd say you're overworking that weight if you don't do it that way. But that's what you're doing. And so if ever you're lifting kettlebells and you notice that you have that rotation or that lean that's there through proprioception, your body informing your mind and your nervous system responding accordingly as to its position in space. If you notice that through proprioception, you're just naturally leaning and rotating and doing these things, and you ever wonder if what you're doing is right or not, trust me, you're doing great. That's a natural part of it. So let's even get into deeper as to what makes this such a wonderful benefit of kettlebell training, is that now, as we learn all of these different exercises, which there's so many of, we get the core, the involvement of the core, not just core stabilization, but we also get the dynamic movement in the core that you don't get with a lot of other exercises, especially even with free weightlifting with a barbell. You don't get the same degree of dynamic movement in the core because the barbell doesn't require the rotation or even the frontal plane adjustment in order to maintain that balance or to bring those 2 points together as we discussed. It really only requires sagittal plane, right? So with a barbell, your core, your training, you're definitely going to get the extension with a barbell, but you're not going to get the rotation and the lean, and that's a lot of obliques, and there's also a lot of abs involved in the rotation and lateral bending or leaning like this. So there's a lot of core involvement. Just understand too, this is a little side note, that when it comes to your core muscles, if you're ever curious how that works, like, am I stable in my core when that happens? Your core stabilizers work independently of the prime movers of the core. Okay, the prime movers of the core are your rectus abdominis, your six-pack muscles, your external obliques, most of your internal obliques, and also the erectors of the spine. Those are all of your prime movers of the core, and those are the ones that allow you to move dynamically through the core. And then below that, you have generally much smaller and much smarter muscles that we would refer to as the inner unit, right? The prime movers, the outer unit, or the prime movers of the core, the inner unit are the stabilizers. And you know, if you were ever to say, well, how is that going to work? The stabilizers of the core again work independently of the prime movers, which means that we should be able to have good core stability even as we're throwing baseballs at 100 miles an hour, or swinging bats, or sprinting and jumping at top speed, and then, you know, even being impacted by somebody on a field and all those types of things. So the position that your prime movers of your core, your outer unit, are in at any given moment doesn't really have any relation to the strength or tension in the inner unit at any given moment. So with that said, that doesn't mean that your core is stable. If your core is not stable, then you probably should not be weightlifting yet, and you should get assessed. You should have a number of assessments, and if your core is not stable, then take the necessary steps to make it stable so that you can progress safely, okay? And that's got nothing to do with, of course, what I'm showing you here. That's a different thing. There are plenty of people who don't have stable core and they're an injury waiting to happen. They could injure themselves getting out of their car. So anyway, there we go. So that to me is the number one thing with the kettlebells, is that we're going to learn how to merge those two lines. To do that, there's going to require a lot of technique. It's going to require a lot of dynamic movement in the core that you're going to love. And it's going to help to balance your body left and right like nothing else. Just remember that kettlebell training and this way of lifting, whether you're using maces and sandbags and kettlebells and all the other stuff, this way of lifting is a skill that you have to develop one layer at a time, just like martial arts. You come in, you're brand new. Hey, let's just make sure that you're breathing properly. Okay, you're breathing fine. Let's make sure that you're moving properly in isolation. Hey, no problem there. Let's get you moving properly in integration. Still no problem. Let's load you up with some weight. Still no problem. Let's get technical. Let's learn how to do swings. Let's learn how to do all of these other exercises that we know and love. By the way, I will say, because I just mentioned the word swings, if you think that the swing is the gotcha moment to my principle that I'm sharing with you about keeping those two lines close together, I'm going to share with you something about the swing, because you're going to say the swing is front to back. And the whole point is you're going to weight way off your plumb line. So how can you say that efficiency is in the kettlebell swing? But now you're missing the point if you think that. The reason being, when that bell comes off your plumb line in the kettlebell swing, it's weightless, it's floating. By the time your arms leave your body, the kettlebell is floating. It floats on the way back down. It floats, it floats, it floats. And then eventually your arms come into contact with your body when that bell is as close to your plumb line as it can possibly be. And then you decelerate that weight eccentrically with your hips, with it as close to your plumb line as possible. So while, yeah, with a kettlebell swing, we are taking it off of our plumb line, we're doing it as a way of demonstrating the exact rule that I'm sharing with you, that I'm only taking on that load when it's really close to my body. After that, I'm going to make it weightless in that moment because I did it efficiently. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.